During the Second World War, the German army developed a variety of innovative equipment and strategies to maximize the effectiveness of its troops in different and varied combat scenarios. While weapons and vehicles tend to garner the most public attention, the camouflage and psychological warfare tactics developed by the Third Reich also gave rise to some of the most ingenious, yet least remembered, creations of the era. It is in this context that the Waffen-SS emerged as the first combat force to adopt the widespread use of camouflage patterns on military uniforms, thanks to designs commissioned by Obersturmbannführer Wilhelm Reni Brandt from art professor Johann Georg Otto Schick. Needless to say, the success of these patterns is more than evident today, as almost all modern armies across the globe use various camouflage designs in their uniforms based on the principles established by Professor Schick more than 80 years ago. Although the body garments seen in photographs from the period became an iconic symbol of the Waffen-SS, comparable to the runes on their collar patches, the truth is that there were other less well-known but equally significant items of equipment, such as the so-called face veils and combat masks for snipers, which complemented this camouflage system. Manufactured in the same way with patterns inspired by nature and designed with meticulous precision, these garments allowed soldiers to blend in even more with their surroundings, enhancing their stealth and improving their performance during military operations, whether in forests, plains, or mountains. Every detail, from the green and brown tones to the reversible designs for different seasons, was carefully designed to achieve maximum invisibility. But without questioning their practical usefulness in combat, the fact that these masks could conceal facial features also meant that they eliminated any human expression, thus turning the wearer into an emotionless figure, a faceless hunter. It is under this idea that some scholars of the subject have suggested that the dehumanizing effect of these masks may have had some influence on the morale of enemy troops and local populations, creating an atmosphere that hovered between fear and uncertainty. Today, we will examine the history of these camouflage masks and face veils used by the German army, especially by the Waffen-SS, their innovative designs, and the possible psychological impact they had on soldiers and civilians during the war. The camouflage masks and face veils employed by the Waffen-SS during the Second World War embody a remarkable fusion of art, technology, and military strategy. Beyond concealing the wearer's identity, these meticulously designed garments enabled soldiers to blend seamlessly with their surroundings, enhancing tactical camouflage. In terms of manufacturing materials, these meticulously crafted garments were primarily made of waterproof cotton, selected for its durability and capacity to retain intricate camouflage patterns, ensuring resilience under the demanding conditions of the battlefield. This material used to be reversible, allowing soldiers to adapt their camouflage to different seasons or environments. For example, one side could be white, designed specifically to blend into snowy landscapes during winter, while the other side featured camouflage patterns such as the Flecktarnmuster or plane tree pattern, or the Eichenlaubmuster or oak leaf pattern, ideal for wooded environments. The camouflage patterns used by German soldiers were varied and carefully designed to mimic nature, breaking up the wearer's silhouette and thus making them difficult for the enemy to detect. Looking at some practical examples, the plane tree pattern, introduced in 1937, featured irregular spots that simulated light filtering through tree leaves, making it ideal for forest environments, as did the oak leaf pattern, used from 1943 to 1945, which incorporated shapes reminiscent of fallen oak leaves. Another notable camouflage within this family of patterns was the so-called impersonal or P-dot pattern, introduced between 1944 and 1945 and characterized by small dots that helped to blur the contours of the uniform, although it should be noted that this pattern was less common in masks due to its late introduction and non-reversible design. The mastermind and person directly responsible for these camouflage patterns is largely attributed to Johann Georg Otto Schick, an art professor from Munich and director of the German Camouflage Research Unit, who in 1935 was commissioned by Obersturmbannführer Wilhelm Reni Brandt to develop effective camouflage patterns. To meet Brandt's directive, Schick studied the effects of light in natural environments, analyzing how it interacted with trees and foliage in different seasons. This scientific approach led to the creation of camouflage patterns that were not only visually appealing, but also highly effective in combat, as they reduced the wearer's detectability. But that wasn't all. In addition to the patterns, these garments incorporated other practical features. Notably, for winter operations, they included a breath diffusion system, a fabric flap with eyelets in the mouth area that dispersed warm exhalations without forming visible vapor clouds, thereby safeguarding positions such as those of snipers, whose survival depended on remaining hidden and still even in cold climates. Moreover, these masks could integrate seamlessly with other camouflage elements, including helmet covers. Ultimately, this comprehensive integration extended to the Waffen-SS uniforms as a whole, where body garments, helmet covers, camouflage masks, and face veils shared unified patterns, maximizing overall concealment effectiveness. Numerous historical and academic sources supported by accounts and testimonies from the period agree that during the Second World War, psychological warfare emerged as a strategic tool of equal importance to conventional armed operations, capable of shaping the course of conflicts by manipulating perceptions and emotions. The ability to instill fear and influence the attitudes and behavior of the enemy not only complemented military tactics, but on occasions could decide the outcome of entire battles. And the Waffen-SS, notorious for their relentless brutality and unshakable ideological fanaticism, contributed significantly to these efforts, as their mere presence and prior reputation acted as an intangible weapon that instilled fear in their opponents and even their allies. However, certain units within this organization took the use of psychological tactics to disturbing extremes, employing elements such as these masks and face veils, but not for tactical purposes. During the Warsaw Uprising in August 1944, the derived Brigade, an infamous unit composed of convicted criminals and undesirable elements of society, perpetrated a series of lengthy atrocities in the Polish capital. One of these was the Wola massacre, where at least 35,000 Polish civilians and combatants were executed in a campaign of relentless repression that included summary killings, rape, and systematic looting. Amidst this chaos, some members of the brigade employed their masks and camouflage veils, not for tactical purposes, as the urban environment of Warsaw limited their usefulness for concealment, but to conceal their identities in the face of the infamy of their actions. These masks, as documented in Polish sources, would have intensified the horror, as stripping the perpetrators of any human features transformed them into spectral figures that sowed terror among civilians and combatants alike. At this point, it would be valid to ask whether the psychological impact of the Waffen-SS camouflage masks can be compared to other psychological warfare tactics of the time, such as, to cite a quick example, the roar of the Stuka sirens during dive bombings, the famous trumpets of Jericho. But without straying too far from the topics we are discussing, we can find an approximation of the answer in the SS itself and its armed wing. As the war progressed, the Waffen-SS's reputation was cemented as a formidable force, feared both for its discipline and its willingness to carry out orders without question, including tactics of terror to weaken enemy morale and control occupied populations. Historians such as Anthony Beaver and James Holland, based on testimonies from Allied and Wehrmacht soldiers, point out that the Waffen-SS were perceived as a ruthless military elite. Their uniforms, adorned with distinctive symbols such as sig runes, projected an image of authority and cohesion that was capable of intimidating their adversaries in any context. Camouflage masks, introduced as a complementary part of their combat equipment, reinforced this perception. Once again, beyond their practical function of concealment, these garments reinforce the image of the Waffen-SS as an enigmatic, revolutionary in a sense, and calculating force. In the present day, the Waffen-SS camouflage masks are extremely rare and coveted items for both collectors and military history enthusiasts. On Live Auctioneers, a renowned online auction platform dedicated to art and antiques, these items are described as rare and exceptional, fetching prices ranging from $850 to $900. On the other hand, at Original Militaria, a Spanish shop specializing in authentic military items, a mask with the distinctive plane tree pattern was priced at €5,000, or about $5,800 at the time of publication of this video. Unfortunately, these are the only two cases I have been able to find on the web of garments described as authentic. Obviously, there must be a few more, but what I am getting at is that this leads me to believe that these camouflage masks were either produced in limited quantities during the war, or that almost all of them were destroyed after the war. As a result of this scarcity, studying their use during the conflict has become complicated, as historians rely solely on photographs and pieces from private collections, such as those found in the book by Daniel Peterson, a military historian and specialist in military uniforms and equipment. It is precisely this scarcity that raises deeper questions. How often were these masks actually used? A discussion on the Axis History Forum points out that although the masks appear regularly in training photos, their presence in combat scenes is notably scarce. Some suggest that their use may have been restricted to specialized units, such as snipers or machine gun teams, while others propose that they were perhaps more of a propaganda symbol or training tool than an everyday item on the battlefield. And this is where the enigma goes to its essential purpose, a dilemma that gives this video its title. With all of the above in mind, can we say that these masks were really just instruments of camouflage? Or are there sufficiently sustainable reasons to claim that they were also psychological weapons designed to instill fear? Far from being mutually exclusive, both perspectives are intertwined in a debate that continues to this day. With that, we have reached the point where each of us, as lovers of military history, must judge for ourselves.
Wir sind des Geiers schwarzer Haufen.
This is the Mutual Broadcasting System.
That's the tale of a Europe in turmoil.
Upon this battle depends the survival of civilization.